everyone, and welcome. It's 7 p.m. on the Eastern Seaboard, 4 o'clock out Pacific, and that means it's time for the Unnext News Podcast, your news source for all things unexplained. And now, I give you your host and the owner of the Unnext Network, Margie K.
Welcome to Unnext News. I'm your host, Margie K., and we are here for a special edition because something came to my attention that really needs to get out there, and everybody needs to know about this because it is such a strange story. So I have a special guest with me this evening. The cowboy, Jim Gray, is a fourth-generation rancher in central Kansas, and he's always had an interest in history. He's done many things from driving a herd of cattle over 200 miles on a 3-week cattle drive to writing a newspaper column, The Way West. The outer space collection in the Geneseo City Museum has always fascinated him. He joined the museum board of directors in 2018, just waiting for the opportunity to go public with the collection. World UFO Day, July 2nd, 2022, seemed to be the time. Welcome to the program, Jim.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, thank you for joining me this evening and for our chats back and forth as of late. I found out about your event through a good friend of mine, Bill Spicer, and I had to call you immediately because this looks fascinating. So why don't we just start at the beginning with the story about who owned the museum and how that got started?
All right. Okay. Well, so Geneseo is just right in the middle of the state of Kansas, so everybody kind of gets oriented where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And just a little town. Not even 200 people here anymore, I don't believe. But a fellow by the name of Elmer Jansen was raised, he was born in the nearby community of Lorain and raised here at Geneseo. And he was a bit of a genius. He had something like 8 different degrees. Let's see, he was a minister, and he was a teacher, he taught Braille, he did sign language, he did ventriloquism, he was a chiropractor.
Wow.
Let's see, what do they call it? Naprathy, doctor. So, yeah, all of these things. And he had this intense interest in the whole story of space people, spacemen, and spacecraft from outer space. So he began. We're not exactly sure when he first made his connections with the other folks, but he got connected with fellows like Buck Nelson out of Mountain View, Missouri, who claimed to have been taken up into space on a flying saucer, and went to these spacecraft conventions and things. Well, in the meantime, he had developed in his own home a museum, not just of the flying saucer stuff, but he, like I say, had this intense interest in the town of Geneseo, and he collected family photographs out of everyone's family albums, and he put them on slides, and we have over 8,000 slides of Geneseo and surrounding community and all that sort of stuff. Because
my goodness,
yeah, just a wonderful collector of things. And so he started out just doing slide programs publicly, and then opened his house up as a museum in 1964. But he had been involved with the whole flying saucer community since the middle 1950s. So it's a little hard to pin down exactly how he first got involved with them. But
it makes you wonder if he had a sighting himself.
No, I am pretty certain. Well, he may have had. If he did, he would have spoken of it because he documented so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he actually did, but he knew all of these people who did, like Buck Nelson, and there was a fellow out of Sapulpa, Oklahoma, who was a Ottawa Indian heritage that went by Chief Buckshot Standing Horse, and he claimed to have been taken up into space as well.
And didn't
so
he also know George Adamski?
Yes, it's my understanding that he knew these people. Pretty much that whole community, they were all interacting, kind of almost like making the circuit. It was really a national movement at the time, and you would find them speaking. Well, part of the collection are, I don't know, a couple of dozen reel tapes of programs that are being given all around the country, even in Washington D.C. And I am wondering, that particular collection, how much of that kind of thing is out there in other collections or not? Because
gosh,
it's
that's
really
the first I've heard of it. I think you've got a gold mine there.
Well, and one of his contacts for that was a fellow out of the Kansas City area. Well, I think he gave a Kansas City address by the name of Charles Bennett. And he provided several recordings for Dr. Jansen's collection. And let's say there were recordings, Buck Nelson had what he called a spacecraft convention on his little ranch north of Mountain View,
Mm-hmm.
and so there are recordings of those presentations, and like I say, all over the place. And the interesting thing is these, and we think this is probably the hook that brought Dr. Jansen in on everything. Being a minister, he was a graduate of the Moody Bible Institute. That it was like a kind of use the term far out, kind of a far out Christian movement, because these like these spacecraft conventions are like revivals, in which they're talking about the alien contact, and they're also relating it to potential for the final days, because we're looking at atomic bombs being exploded around the earth, and they were being warned of such things, that this was causing problems with the polarity of the planet and threatening the entire solar system, and those were the things that the spacemen were bringing to their attention.
Right. Buck Nelson talks about that in his book, that their main message was to quit using atomic energy because it was causing harm to the entire universe, not just our little planet. So, and that did seem to be a theme with all of these contactees. Now, do you know if Doc Jansen was in touch with Dr. Frank Strange's?
I don't know. Yeah. See, okay. So with these tapes, we're just learning more all the time, and we're just now getting them transferred over to DVD, so that the tapes are somewhat delicate, and so we're trying to get them transferred over to DVD so that we can study them more closely. And there are just a number of people that he's in contact with, and I can't say for sure that that's one of them or not, but now he was the one that was in contact with the Valiant Thor. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's some reference to that in the museum, to him in the museum, but just very, very slight. But so
Okay.
I would expect to find something in those tapes along those lines. There's a Prince Neosam that comes from another planet that speaks to some of these spacecraft conventions and things like that. Again, it's a really unique slice of time, that 1950s to early 1970s slot.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to these things. They're traveling clear across the country, by car, by camper. Back in those days, it was the fast food industry wasn't begun yet. People just packed their picnic lunches and take off. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of the atmosphere in these little convention/camps that were being put on. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times we see, just a little clip of some UFO convention from that time period. And it, generally speaking, when they show these things on newer documentaries, they're kind of making fun of them, like these people
Sure.
were crackpots. But,
Oh, yes.
but perhaps this Doc Jansen, who obviously was a genius, maybe he knew something. And so that leads me to the next thing. Well, let's stick with the museum for just a minute. So
let me say that I was first introduced to all of this when I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
Dr. Jansen there was a good close friend of his who published a couple of books on the subject, pretty extensive information in those books, detailed stuff about the languages from other planets and things like that. A fellow by the name of John Dean lived just 25 miles down the road at a little town in Nickerson, Kansas. And he had gotten John Dean invited to Geneseo to put on a program about outer space at a PTA meeting. And my folks took me there, and the place was crowded with all the local people. And John Dean got up with his slide program and began to talk about not just outer space, but aliens visiting from outer space. And oh my gosh, little old Geneseo was kind of in shock. And from that point forward, and it lasted for about a 3-hour program. He just had so much information.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, so almost 100%, almost everybody just thought of Dr. Jansen and his friends as crackpots, as you mentioned. They thought of them as crackpots. So he kind of was working on the fringe and doing what he could to bring his information to light. But that was the problem I had then with the museum, was that here a few years ago, it kind of had fallen into not ruin, but close to it, because the city had kind of let it. The city now, Dr. Jansen owned the museum and gave it to the city just before his death, and they had maintained it for years, but they had let it fall away, and of course lots in the museum besides the outer space collection, but everyone was embarrassed by that, and I thought that was the one thing out of the entire museum that people beyond Geneseo would be interested in. And so
True.
When they decided to reorganize the board and try to bring the museum back, and I was brought on to help do that, and we started doing that in 2018, and so
was your
along
only...
I've been wanting to bring this forward, but it was like, when do I do this? And this year's when it came about. So. Yeah.
So was your interest piqued when you were 12 years old and you heard John Dean
I just had a passing interest in it. It wasn't, like I say, it was a long program. I was tired by the end of the night, like everyone else was, but it stuck with me. Yes, it did stick with me. And to go back to the museum and see in the museum, John Dean was actually a teacher in the school system at Nickerson and taught mechanical arts, and he produced a lot of technical drawings, like schematics of spaceships, and some of them look like flying saucers, some of them are big, elongated motherships, and we have all of those original drawings, and that's what returning to the museum, and a lot of folks who grew up in this town will tell you that even though everyone seems to be embarrassed by it, they were kind of drawn to those to John Dean's collection, and that was one of the things that they always remembered about visiting the museum. So
I wonder
it was
where
always there. It was always kind of just there. This subtle suggestion in the museum that there was something beyond that needed to be investigated. So,
do you know how John Dean came up with these ideas for the drawings of the spaceships? Did he actually see them?
No, John, a lot like Doc Jansen, he had a visitation. He was and he had been wounded in the war, and he had been visited while he was in a hospital, a military hospital, by someone, and then never really had another visitation after that. But
so when you say visited, you mean E.T.?
I do, yes.
Okay.
And that then kept him questioning and learning what he could, and then coming into contact with so many of these contactees, the people who had actually been directly involved. And so he got descriptions from people and then turned them into the drawings. He did a lot of the drawings where he probably did the drawings for Buck Nelson's little book. He produced a book of his own that has a great number of these drawings in them. So,
okay.
And so he never has another physical contact, but he has a telepathic contact, and they're sending him messages once in a while, and then he's writing how sometimes he's confused by the messages, and it's just such a interesting.
I'm gonna have to see if I can get my hands on John Dean's book. I've got Buck Nelson's book on the way, because wow, what a story that is! Right in my state in Missouri.
Now I can't remember the second book that has so many of the drawings in, but his first book is Flying Saucers and the Scriptures. Again, Christian-based thing, and then in the second book, he goes a little more into his own life and into questioning whether these entities they begin by thinking they're all good and they're all here to help, and then they begin to realize, well, not all of them are so good, because they're finding that there's a conflict going on even between them. These ETs are having their own conflicts between themselves. So yeah, so he's having a little bit of a conflict himself on who to trust and what's going on. So
yeah, absolutely. And there have been a lot of people over the years who have been contactees, but not very many people now know about these older incidents. Right. And so your town decided to have a World UFO Day in Dimension G for Geneseo on July 2nd, which is World UFO Day.
Yes.
And so what is going to be going on for this event?
Okay. Well, we have a number of things that we haven't actually discussed that we're gonna do. There's going to be a dedication ceremony of a symbol that we discovered outside the museum early in the morning. There's going to be speakers throughout the day, and you got to understand. Okay, so Geneseo is this small community. We've got the museum is in Dr. Jansen's house, which is kind of a unique setting, but space is limited. We do have a large area outside of the house, and that's where we're actually going to have the main events going on, like the speakers and that sort of thing. So it's an outdoor setting. So we're asking people to bring their lawn chairs, and we'll have a series of speakers, which you have offered to be one, I believe.
Yes, I will be there, and we haven't discussed what I'm going to talk about, but I think it's going to be Valiant Thor.
Oh, excellent.
So we can talk about, if you want to do that, and then you're going to have a parade at 5 p.m.
Correct.
And
and we've got folks that are going to decorate their yards around town, and it's like getting a freight train rolling, especially with the general consensus that this stuff was something that we wanted to keep hidden, and we're finding that as people kind of learn about what we really want to do with this, they're looking at it as a chance to have some fun and maybe celebrate something that hasn't been recognized for.
Oh, sure. It sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. And on your Facebook page, it says you're going to people are going to dress up and also make you're having a contest for the best spacecraft. Is that right? Yeah.
Well, we've got some folks. And it's not just Geneseo people. Anyone who wants to bring something in. There's a fellow from about 30 miles away stopped in a month or so ago to the museum and wanted to know if he could bring his flying saucer over that he had made out of an old lawnmower that he had, a riding mower that he turned into a flying saucer. So yeah, we love it.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So yeah, we'd like to have all kinds of
and then
characters running around the streets on that day. And then we've got, Geneseo is like so many towns, I think, across the whole Great Plains, in which we've just lost our population and our businesses have disappeared. And actually, for the last couple of years, we virtually had no business other than the grain elevator. But we have recently had a gal open up a little breakfast cafe out on the edge of town, and downtown there's a young couple that's opened up a bar and served some food with it. So we've got a little bit of that going, and hopefully we can bring some food trucks in, support all the folks that might come in.
Well, I hope they're ready to be busy because I think you're going to have some people come into this event. People are always looking for something new and different, and this sounds like a lot of fun. But let's get to the nitty-gritty of this, because you found, or somebody found, I want you to tell me the story about this behind the direction,
right?
What you found.
So the dedication ceremony that we want to do is like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and what we're dedicating is a very strange thing that occurred after we decided to go ahead with promoting this collection and celebrating it on World UFO Day. We actually had this open ground to the east of the house was not Dr. Jansen's, and had been two different houses on that property, and they were torn down, and we were able to get possession of that property only just last year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so one of the gals from the board was out working, cleaning all the debris out of the gutters, and she'd done it once before, and hadn't noticed anything. But this time, I don't know if she just did a little better job of cleaning, got down to just the bare concrete, and here in the concrete, and we think that this concrete the gutter was maybe poured in the 1940s, well before Dr. Jansen's involved with this whole UFO thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not on his property to start with. It's actually on the property next door.
Right.
But it's etched into the concrete just as pretty as can be. And I have to tell you, the city man says there's nothing etched in the concrete anywhere in the city. And it looks like a compass. And that vector line, that pointer, is pointing to the southwest across the yard toward the back of the house, which would have been Dr. Jansen's bedroom / office, and the thing is, okay, when I first looked at it, I was looking at it from the street, and actually was looking at it upside down, because I'm looking at what the direction it's pointing to. But then when you think about a compass, the top of the compass would be north.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned around and I get on the yard side of the compass with the top pointing north, and the little vector pointing away at my feet to the southwest. And gosh, that pointer sure looks odd to me. And so after taking a photograph of it, I blew it up. And to my astonishment, it's not a pointer at all. It's a little flying saucer.
It does look like it.
It's not a vague flying saucer. It's a flying saucer. In the concrete, and actually when you see it for yourself, you'll see how small it is, that someone would have actually taken the time to perfectly mark that out. It looks a little ghostly image, but it's definitely a flying saucer pointing towards the house.
Mm-hmm.
But on further, I don't know what you call it, examination or whatever, further thought about what this thing was pointing at. I've been to Roswell, New Mexico for that was in 2018 for their special UFO days, and it just popped into my head, well, where's Roswell? And if you take that line and you run it straight as an arrow, just as straight as can be, southwest from Geneseo, Kansas, 500 miles, it'll strike Roswell, New Mexico. What's the connection?
That's amazing. That I don't know what to think of it. Because here you have someone who's extremely interested in UFOs and going to conventions and meeting all these people. This Doc Jansen, who owned that home next door to it. Do you know when he moved into that house by any chance?
He lived there with his parents. So they were in that house in the 40s.
They were in there in the 40s. Okay.
Yeah. He lived there with his parents, and then it was after they passed away that he turned his home into a museum. It looks like he was being watched to me. He didn't make that. He did not make this thing. It's not even, it's not even on his property. But
he surely would have mentioned it to someone if he did know about it.
Oh, of course. He documented everything. We have a book of every one of his sermons. he has everyone, the date they were given, when, that's how well organized he was about, and the slides has a set of notes that go with the slides. The slides are all numbered, notes are numbered, explanations of who's in the photographs if he knew them, and great detail, but nothing about this.
Nothing about this
on the curb.
You know what this reminded me of when I first saw it was the show, The Skinwalker Ranch. And then there's another show called Blind Frog Ranch, which is near there. And on that program, they found one or maybe two markers that had been put there by the government in the concrete. And that is what reminded me of that. I don't know if there's any connection whatsoever, but it's extremely bizarre.
Yeah. Well, just because of the Roswell connection, we just started calling it the Roswell Compass. So we think I would love for folks to come check it out for themselves. And did I send you? There's also, to the side of it, there are a couple of letters. But okay, if you looked at them from the street, one of them would look like a J with the little tabletop on the top of the J, and the other one looks like a strange, almost like a Greek letter. But if you look at them from the yard, so that you're looking at with the compass at the same angle at north, they're just very strange letters, and what they represent, we don't know. Maybe someone out there could tell us. But, John Dean did record 2 or 3 different languages from other planets, but I checked the alphabets for those, and they didn't correspond. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. I don't believe that you've sent that to me yet, but I'll go back through and see. And of course, I will be there in person, so I'm definitely going to look at it. Have you had or thought about having anyone who is now not a geologist, because this is concrete, but somebody who can analyze that to see what the age is of the carving and the age of the concrete?
No, and actually, I don't know that I would know who that might be, but we'd sure like to follow that up. Yeah,
I'll see what I can do on my end about that. I've got a few contacts, so yeah, I think that would be very interesting to find out. Now, with all of this kind of going public and people being more relaxed about the UFO subject, especially since the government has come forward and said, yeah, there are things out there and we don't know what they are. How has the town reacted to that? Are people more, have they talked about their own sightings at all?
I've talked to one person who, in kind of a private setting, said, well, I've never said this to anyone, and proceeded to tell about a sighting that was actually a landing that was actually within the city limits of Geneseo, and that the whole family never ever talked about it after it happened. And so that, and what brought this up, she was talking about her sister was on her deathbed, and that was just not that long ago. And so again, they hadn't ever talked about it, and so she took the opportunity before it was gone to ask her sister, did that really happen? And her sister said, oh yeah, it did. So
did they say when?
Oh golly, I'll have to see if she can, because then I tried to get her to talk more publicly about it. Oh no, she doesn't want anyone to know. I'll have to talk to her about that, but I would think, she said she was little, So it probably was in the 1950s,
Mm-hmm.
58 to 60, somewhere in that range, maybe. I personally have had, I've again, I never spoke about it, but my I lost my wife to cancer in 2014.
Mm.
She and I were high school sweethearts, and we in Geneseo is surrounded by an old what was known as a Continental oil field, the old Conoco oil company,
Uh-huh.
and crisscrossed all across the farm ground was these oil field roads. So us the kids in Geneseo grew up riding those oil field roads all over the place, and of course they made good parking spots too. And we were out one evening, and suddenly the whole inside of the car lit up like an extremely bright white light.
Uh-oh.
And I looked up through the windshield, and the light actually, it was like a beam. The light just sucked up into the sky and disappeared. I did not see the ship it came from. I just saw the beam.
Okay.
And it just disappeared. Now, people talk about these things, and they talk like they're abductions and like they have a missing amount of time, and we had absolutely no missing time. We went right back into town, scared to death, sat out in front of her parents' house for a little bit on a calm summer night when suddenly a gust of wind out of nowhere just came right down the middle of Main Street like a whirlwind. And I said, after that had passed, I just said, you're going in the house and I'm going home. And that was the end of that. So
Might be fair to say that things are all not quiet there right now. You may have some things going on. Are you going to do a sky watch at this event?
we are. Okay, so Geneseo normally does fireworks for the 4th of July weekend, and so there's fireworks that evening, and after the fireworks, then back on the museum grounds, we are doing an outdoor movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was my wife's favorite movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to do The Day the Earth Stood Still, and kind of a UFO watch. That the movie should be ending about midnight that night, so that's where we'll be.
Oh boy, that is going to be a one full day, so we can only hope that it's not scorching hot and not a rain downpour. Either one of those things would be bad. But, I can't wait to get out there to go through this museum. It's the first time I've heard about it, and I've been a UFO investigator for almost 40 years. So I am looking forward to this big time.
Yeah. The town's done a pretty good job of keeping it secret. So.
Yes, they have done a really good job.
So we're gonna try to change that. I don't know that John Dean is as well known as folks like Buck Nelson, but John was very, very knowledgeable about all this stuff. He's got a lot of you might call it insider knowledge. So very interesting fellow. At one time, he was told that Hutchinson, Kansas would be just beyond Nickerson, a pretty good sized little town in central Kansas, and that there were 10 of these spacemen living amongst us in Hutchinson, and a couple of them living in Nickerson. So it's kind of one of the things that they were human. Told. Yes, they did. The ones that they were dealing with. Now they knew about the ones that didn't look human, but they didn't really have much interaction with those. They were told that now these human-looking ones were part of a group of planets who had combined together to kind of keep everything running smooth, I guess. I don't know. You know, it was kind of a confederacy of planets.
Like a federation?
Yeah, and that's not the word they used either, but it was something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a confederation of planets. Seems like. Anyway, there's just. I think it'd take a doctorate to understand all the ins and outs of what these guys were into. And again, it's kind of a little slice of 1950s, 1960s Americana that most people have no idea ever existed, and yet it was a nationwide movement. At Buck Nelson's convention, they just called out where are people from, and again, these are people who are just driving in their campers and maybe taking the train or whatever, but they're from all over the United States, Virginia and Alaska, and various states were called out when they asked where are people from. So
yeah, that's a long drive from Alaska.
It would be so interesting to know more about just the everyday folks that are doing that. You know, who's following all this, you know?
It makes you think there had to be something to it. Otherwise, these people wouldn't have gone public and suffered the ridicule that they did. You know, it just gives more credibility to the story.
Even though, see, and I kind of think that, and I don't know what, I have no explanation for what's going on. And it's like these folks are almost being played, almost like they're being set up to look like crackpots. Because some of the things they write about, I mean, Buck Nelson talks about visiting Venus and going to the homes of people who live on Venus, and they have cars without wheels that kind of just glide over the surface of the planet, and so these it's like, okay, if they were being taken off to somewhere, were they being played? Was this all just a setup to make them look like crackpots? I don't know. I just don't know what's going on.
Well, you know, the flying cars, basically, with no wheels. Back in the 50s, that would have been something unheard of. So it's kind of hard to believe that he would make something like that up.
Oh, I don't think they made it up at all.
Yeah.
I think they saw what they saw, but was it real? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like the flying cars, that's the Jetsons, and that's not till the 60s.
Yeah, of course. Now we can all believe that it's coming. You know, we know it's coming.
Yeah.
Because of our technology advances. But, you know, the UFO flap of 1973-74 that really went across the entire country, a lot of it was focused in Piedmont, Missouri, and Patterson and around Clearwater Lake. But really, that flap went across the entire country, and that's at about 37 degrees latitude. We find it going, you know, across the country. Did your area experience anything during that time?
Well, see, that would have been, I think, 72 when I experienced that. And there were a lot of sightings in 72 in western Kansas. There were newspaper accounts about these sightings. And at the same time, there were the cattle mutilations going on out in this part of the world, or maybe all over the country. I don't know, but
yeah, it was all over the country.
And so, and it's funny how those things come and then they go. You don't really hear much about that sort of thing anymore. Like in those days, it was God, every week you were hearing about it somewhere. And I'm sure you're probably aware of the 1897 sightings.
Yes, the airships. I
airships.
wrote an article about that.
Those things were all over Texas, up into Kansas and Nebraska, and everybody thought those folks were drinking too much or whatever. But it was so. The thing about that one that really got me is it almost seemed as though they were purposely traveling across the country like a grid, like maybe they were mapping the surface of the planet or something. I don't know what they were doing, but that was such a unique thing too, and very credible people like governors who saw
the governor of Kansas saw one of those airships. Yeah. But you're right about the flaps. There be, a lot of sightings in a short period of time is called a flap. And we've had numerous, many of those occurring across the United States, around the world, at different times. But I'll tell you that this is just a fascinating event, and it just fascinates me that this carving in the cement was just recently found, and nobody in your town talked about it before now.
Oh, absolutely no.
I mean, so this is just in the last couple months that you found this?
Yes. Oh, yes. It was, I say not more than a week after we decided that we were going to celebrate World UFO Day. I raised cattle, and I was going out to take care of cattle in the morning, and I saw that the secretary was at the museum as I passed by, so I stopped in, and she says, "Hey, have you seen that strange markings out in the curb?" And I said, "No, I hadn't seen." So she took me out there and looked. Well, that is strange. But I had cattle to take care of, so I just went on. But then when I came back and I looked at it, I really couldn't believe what I was seeing, as I took photographs and I posted some pictures of it, asking people what they thought it was. And a very immediate response was, "It's a compass."
Mm-hmm. And did you take a real compass and check to see if the directions were precise on that? They were correct?
No, I haven't. No, I should do that. Yeah.
I wonder about that. Okay. Well, I'll bring my investigator self out to this event.
Yeah. And that's what we want. We want people to question this thing and, tell us what in the world it is, or what in space it is. Yeah.
Right. And then we'll cover this for UNX News as well. And I can't wait to put together a little documentary on this event. So I thank you for being with me this evening and telling us more. How can people find out about the event? Do they just go to Facebook or what?
Yeah, okay. We have a Facebook page, and it's just Geneseo City Museum, and you can find out. We're going to be continually updating that as we go along about what's going on.
Okay, and do you want to give your phone number out?
Oh, well, yeah, I can do that. I usually don't answer if it's an unidentified number, so you might have to just leave a message, and I'll get back to anyone who wants to talk about it. But my number is 785. 531-2058.
Okay. And the event itself, there's no charge, correct?
No charge. We're a small venue. We kind of would like people to get out and see what's going on here, and we felt like if we just put it up for donations, that people help us push this thing along that way, and we don't have the facilities to have an indoor venue, so Yeah, you got to bring your own chairs. I think it'll be a pleasant experience as long as, like you say, we don't get a thunderstorm or something like that. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
So Geneseo, Kansas, Geneseo,
correct.
and the Geneseo City Museum. And this is starting at 10 a.m. and it's ending at midnight. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
Bring your lawn chair. So I'm looking forward to seeing you out there, Jim, and taking a tour of that museum. Thank you so much.
Okey-doke. I appreciate you taking an interest in it. It's a lot of fun. So
okay. Well, as my listeners know, I'm all over this one, and I will be reporting on it, and you'll get more information in the near future. But please keep this in mind for July 2nd. It would be a fun trip. And I do understand that there is an RV park in a town nearby. There's also a motel in a town nearby, but there's no motel in Geneseo, so you're going to have to plan your trip. All right. I'm your host, Margie K., and I will see you here again at UNX News.